Hey, how's it going? We're the Basic Liches. Today we're going to be going over 8 major differences between Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition and Pathfinder 2nd edition.
These are the 8 biggest differences that Kamo and myself have come across as people that have primarily dealt with Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition as our primary system for the past 6+ years or so. This is what we've noticed about Pathfinder 2e. We want to share those differences with you and let you know that if you're new to this system, this is what you should be expecting.
D&D 5e and Pathfinder 2e are both D20 systems, which means they're closely related. If you wanted to learn a different game that wasn't either of these two, it might be more difficult.
I'm gonna get out of here and let Kamo do his thing real quick, but before I do, I want to pass a question to you out there in the audience. Can you guess one of the things that we will not be talking about today? Something that is not a difference between these two systems. Stay to the end of the video and we'll let you know if you're correct.
The first most obvious difference between these two systems is the action economy, which in Pathfinder is a 3-action economy system, and in D&D is an action type system. D&D 5e action types range from attack actions, bonus actions, movement actions, reactions. Pathfinder also uses these action types, but they more support the 3-action economy of the main system. So if you're going to take a move action in Dungeons & Dragons, in Pathfinder it would look more like using one of the 3 actions of the 3-action economy. For an example, let's say that we wanted our character to move to a creature, attack it, and then move away. In D&D, we would use a move action to move to the creature, we'd use our attack action to attack it, and then because we took our move action on this turn, we could still use the rest of our remaining movement to move away from it. In Pathfinder, if we wanted to do this, we would use one action to move to the target, one action to attack it, and then another action to move away from it, regardless of how much feet or movement we had left. Another example for a casting class, like a wizard, druid, or a cleric, is that in Dungeons & Dragons you can't really cast 2 spells within one turn. There are certain ways you can do this, yes. You could cast one spell and then the other spell can be a cantrip, or because you can't do more than one attack action within that round, right? Or if you have the twinned spells as the sorcerer, yes, you can cast 2 spells within the same turn. In Pathfinder, you can pretty much cast however many spells you want to, as long as it uses those 3 actions from the 3-action economy. So if a spell took up 2 actions, and you wanted to cast another spell that took up 1 action, you can do those 2 spells in the same turn. D&D 5th edition gets bonus actions. Bonus actions sound like something you should get in addition to what you already have. It sounds like everyone should get it, right? In 5th edition, a bonus action really is given by either the class, the race, or a feature that you have chosen for your character. Pathfinder kind of handles their attacks of opportunity, just like D&D handles their bonus actions. Attacks of opportunity, again, are when a creature is next to you and they leave your circle of range for attacking, that even if it's not your turn, you can use a reaction to attack them as they're leaving. While in Pathfinder, only certain classes, ancestries, feats support this type of action. In D&D, it's kind of a known thing that almost any character can do.
Let's talk about character customizations, one of the biggest differences between these two systems. In Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, character customization is practically non-existent. That doesn't mean that different character classes and different player characters don't feel different, but you are relieved of choices in the matter. Your class and your subclass are going to determine almost all of the features and abilities that you're going to get from level 1 all the way to level 20. There is an optional rule, which almost everybody plays with, where you can use feats, where instead of taking an ability score increase, you take an optional feat instead. Your other option for actually customizing your character in any sort of meaningful way is to dive down into multi-classing. So if you're a barbarian and you want to learn to be sneaky, you have to multi-class into the rogue class, which means you need to have a dexterity higher than 13, I believe. There is not a lot of room for player creativity outside of the feats and multi-classing. In Pathfinder 2e, wow, it is drastically different. It is culture shock coming from 5th edition and busting into Pathfinder 2e. You are customizing your character at level 1 the second you start creating your character. Pathfinder has 4 different types of feats that you can take. Ancestry feats, class feats, skill feats, and general feats. You are going to be choosing from a giant list of feats even at level 1 at character creation. This is going to make you immediately different from everybody else at the table. You are going to be able to tailor your character to the vision you have in your head of how you want this thing to play. Unlike 5e, there is tons more flexibility with these feats and the direction that you want to take your character. If you're in the middle of your Pathfinder campaign, it gives you flexibility to do things like, hey, I've been hanging out with this alchemist all this time. Maybe I can take this feat that lets me start crafting things in alchemy. You can do that in Pathfinder. You're given quite literally an immense list of feats. So as long as you meet prerequisites, you can sort of mold your character as you see fit. Coming over from 5th edition, this is going to seem incredibly overwhelming, but don't let it. When you first create your character, you have to pick a few feats, and then after that, it's just once every single time that you level up. You look at your feats, you're going to probably be doing it in downtime. It's not a big deal, but it does give you lots more room for flexibility if you're into that thing. One final difference with character creation and character customization is that Wizards of the Coast has not really given us a lot of new character classes. In fact, they've given us one since the birth of 5th edition, the Artificer. Paizo, on the other hand, loves to crank out new character classes with all of their new books and all of their new releases. There are a ton of new character classes, and that means there's lots more class feats.
Another critical difference between these two systems is criticals. Everyone's rolling on d20s, and when we see a 20, we're going to be expecting results. In D&D, that d20 will be an automatic critical for a weapon attack, and if it's a skill check, some people house rule whether that's a critical or not. Per the rules, it doesn't always mean that it is a critical. But the critical fails, it works the same way, rolling a 1 on the d20, critical failure for attack rolls, not so much always automatically critical for skill checks. With this system, you can run into games where no critical failures or successes happen just because of pure luck. You can just kind of be within the middle nebulous area where nothing exciting happens. Pathfinder 2nd Edition offers more opportunities for criticals and more opportunities for critical fumbles. You get this because you can also get criticals by getting 10 over the armor class or difficulty class that you're rolling against. In Pathfinder, you can critically hit and critically fumble without rolling 1 and 20. Here's how we do it. So if the check that you needed to make was 17 and you rolled the dice, you didn't get a nat 20, but after all your modifiers, it comes to 27. You can still change that success into a critical success, and you're still critical. I love that's my favorite part. But that also means the opposite. If you roll low, and that same check was 17, but you rolled 7, you can turn that failure into critical failure. Now what happens when we actually roll 1s and 20s on our checks in Pathfinder? When we roll 20s, we upgrade the level of success that we have had. And we roll 1s, we downgrade that success. There's 4 levels of success. That's critical fumble, failure, success, critical success. Those 4. So let's say the difficulty check was really easy. Maybe the difficulty check for something we needed to do is 5. We rolled the dice, we got a 1. And even after all the modifiers, we have a 7. That does not mean we succeed. That means that that roll would have succeeded, but because we rolled a 1, it failed. Because there's more of these really great results and really terrible results, it's going to result in a more swingier game, where there's going to be a lot more variation between how combat is going.
The minute you bust out the Pathfinder beginner box, you're going to notice that modifiers are a lot different in Pathfinder than they are in 5th edition. How can modifiers be drastically different in one of these games versus the other? Well, Dungeons & Dragons tries its hardest to keep the maths tight. They never let the numbers get very high, even if you're getting into like levels 10 or higher. The main thing that's going to be bumping up your modifier in 5th edition is something called your proficiency bonus. Every single character gets this, and it is a static increase from level 1 to 20, and it is the same regardless of the character class that you're playing. It starts off at a +2, and if you get to all the way to level 20, it's at a +6. So even at level 20, you're going to have a base of +11 at the highest level in D&D. And then if you're rolling your skill checks and you get proficiency in those, maybe if you're a rogue or a bard and you have expertise, you can bump it up a little bit more. But for the most part, those numbers are pretty tight. Not necessarily modifiers, but your armor class in 5th edition never really increases all that much throughout your adventures either. It sort of stays static unless you bump up your ability score and dexterity, or you have magic items that are going to increase it. This means that low-level creatures in D&D, they can still hit you even though you're like level 10, like a pack of goblins. You know, they can still whittle away at you even though you can one-shot them very easily. Which brings us to Pathfinder, where pretty much on the regular you're going to be rolling like +20 something in your best stats at level 1. It's kind of like culture shock. You're like, okay, here we go. Pathfinder does not shy away from high number modifiers. Getting 10 plus and much, much more than that by the time you get to level 20, that is not uncommon. That is what is going to happen. We're still new to Pathfinder, so we haven't hit higher levels, but from what we've seen and read online, the math behind this system is incredibly tight for you and the monsters. The reason that it's like this is so that it doesn't break that brand new fancy critical hit and critical fumble system that they cooked up for Pathfinder 2e. Part of the reason that your modifiers grow is because every single time you level up in Pathfinder, a lot of your things are always going to be increasing by 1, like your proficiency bonuses, your armor class goes up, your spell checks, your attack bonuses, everything is going up constantly in Pathfinder 2e. This means that low-level scum and monsters and evil, they're not going to be able to even touch you as you go up certain levels.
Another similar system we have between the two are advantage and disadvantage from 5th edition, and bonuses and penalties from Pathfinder. They work very similarly. Advantage, disadvantage, bonuses, penalties, these are great tools for DMs, GMs alike to work with their players. If there's something that they feel a player should be really good at, easy to do, advantage, bonus. If there's something that they think is difficult for this player to do, disadvantage, penalties. Easiest example in D&D is that a barbarian, while raging, has advantage on strength checks. In Pathfinder, this would look more like +5 to athletic bonus. In Pathfinder, there are penalties to subsequent attacks. So 3 actions, you want to make an attack with every action. It's going to be at a -5 on the second attack, -10 on the third attack. So by the third attack, if you're using a +8 rapier, that attack is going to be at -2. In D&D, rolling disadvantage or advantage means you roll the 2d20s, take the higher or lesser result. On average, this tends to be +5 or -5. +5 for advantage, -5 for disadvantage. So if we wanted to really translate that into Pathfinder, you could just do things like, okay, +5 on your next check, -5 on your athletics, because it's a really rocky terrain.
All right, let's talk about resting, healing, and dying in Dungeons & Dragons 5e and Pathfinder. In D&D, anytime you go to rest for 8 hours, you immediately heal up all of your hit points. It doesn't matter if you were as close to death as humanly possible, or if you only are missing 1 or 2 HP, you go back to full. You can also take a short rest, which is 1 hour long, and you can roll some hit dice, which is based on your character class and your level, and you can restore some hit points that way. If you take a fiendish strike and it brings you down to less than 0 hit points, you then have to start making death saves while you're unconscious. Death saves mechanically work that while it's your turn, you can't do anything except make a death saving throw. You roll a d20, and this is a flat roll, which means you do not add any modifiers. You're trying to roll a 10 or higher. You need to get 3 successes to come back to life. If you roll 3 failures, you're dead. If you roll a critical success, you get up immediately and you have 1 hit point. You're heroically revived. You're like, I wasn't really dead, just a flesh wound. On the flip side of that deadly coin, if you roll a critical fumble/critical failure, you are going to get 2 failures for those death saving throws. And again, all you need to do is roll 3 of them total, and you're dead. The other thing that can kill you outright is if you take like a shitload of damage and it brings you down to like negative what like your HP is, your max HP. So if you're at like 20 HP and you go to like negative 20 HP in one attack, I think that just outright instantly kills you. It's pretty rare. In Pathfinder, if you rest for 8 hours, you are going to regain hit points based on your Constitution modifier multiplied against your level. So healing is going to happen a little bit slower in Pathfinder, but if you have like a cleric or someone that can heal in the party, they regain all of their lost spells and they can start healing the rest of the party during the day, which I sort of like because at least in the fiction of it that's happening within the world, you have the cleric that's doing lay on hands or whatever, and they're healing you with magic. Whereas in Dungeons and Dragons, you just sort of like stabbed up the wazoo and you're just filled with holes, and you go to bed for 8 hours and you wake up and you're like, oh, I feel great. They're like, dude, you were almost dead last night. Oh, I could really go for some bangers and mash. Just point me to the nearest porridge. I got to take a shit, but I'm going to be good. I'm perfectly fine. All right, dying. Dying is drastically different in Pathfinder 2e. It is a little bit cumbersome and a little bit weird the first time you read it. Do not get intimidated by it because I think it's really, really well done. And once you sort of experience it in Pathfinder 2e, you're going to be like, I like it. I like it a lot. Dying in Pathfinder 2e is all about the dying condition, which you receive when your hit points drop below 0. You get dying 1 as a condition. And what you're trying to do is lower your dying condition to dying 0, in which case you will then be given a wounded condition, and then you can then be healed, or you'll get a hit point after an hour or something. But on the flip side of that, you're going to be making recovery checks, and the recovery checks are going to be either lowering your dying condition if you succeed at them, or if you're failing at them, they're going to be going up. And if you ever reach dying 4, you are dead. So let's sort of backtrack. Let's sort of figure this all out. So you drop, you have the dying 1 condition. Now you have to start making recovery checks on your turn. Plus, you also have to move in turn order just before the creature that took you down to 0 HP. So a recovery check means you're rolling a d20 and it's a flat check, which means there's no modifiers. So you just roll it and you're hoping to roll higher than what you need to succeed at. In this case, if you have dying 1, it's going to be 10 plus your dying condition, which means 10 plus 1, which is 11. So you need to roll an 11 or higher on a d20 with no modifiers. If you get a critical success, you lower your dying condition by 2. If you get a regular success, you lower it by 1. If you get a failure, it raises by 1. And if you get a fumble/critical failure, it raises by 2. So if you have dying 1 and you get a critical failure, you roll a 1, you are now going to be at dying 3. You following me? You still with me? Let's say you're able to lower your dying condition down to 0. That means that you're just unconscious at this point. People can heal you magically, or if you wait a long enough time, you'll regain 1 hit point. I think it's like an hour or so. But you get the wounded 1 condition. What the hell does wounded 1 mean? Well, if you drop down below 0 hit points again in the same combat, or in the same day, I think, you are going to add whatever your wound level is to your dying level. So that means instead of starting off at dying 1, you're going to start off at dying 2, meaning that you're more likely to hit dying 4 and therefore die faster. The other way that you can get out of dying immediately is that in Pathfinder 2e, everyone gets what's called hero points when they start a session. It sort of works like inspiration in D&D 5e, except you can use a hero point to immediately get up, and it's like a heroic thing that's happening. It's like, I'm not dead, rising up to slay these beasts. I'm not gonna lie, the very first time I read the dying rules for Pathfinder 2e, my eyes crossed and I was like, what am I reading? But I read them again, I digested them, I watched a video, it was probably like no nat, and it made perfect sense. And it makes so much sense. Again, when I think about the fiction of it, I like how when you rest, you're only recovering a little bit of HP. You need magical healing if you want to recover faster. With the dying condition and the wounded condition and how this all works, it makes it so that you just can't keep dropping in combat with 0 consequences. That's something that can happen in 5th edition, and it's pretty annoying as a dungeon master when people are just dropping and then the bard goes by, oh, healing word, he's back up. Oh, he dropped again, healing word, he's back up. Oh, cleric, paladin walks by, he dropped again, lay on hands, bring him back up. There's so many ways to recover magically in 5th edition that death doesn't even seem like something that could possibly happen in most games.
Another pretty discernible difference are player roles. Players make all of their checks and make all of their checks out in the open for all to see. In Pathfinder, it's played a little differently. There are roles, there are checks called secret checks. These checks are player checks that are made by the game master, known only to the game master and not any other player. These checks are checks that are made to conceal, checks that are made to sense or recall information. So if you wanted to conceal yourself or an object, you wanted to sense the motives of a creature or an NPC, or if you wanted to recall information, recall knowledge. Any check that the player should not be aware of, they succeeded or didn't succeed, should be rolled by the game master.
The very last difference that Kamo and I have noticed is that these two products are supported entirely differently by the companies that create them. Dungeons & Dragons has an incredibly slow release of books. You're going to get about 4, maybe 5 books throughout the entire year. They almost come out quarterly, and they all sort of follow the same release schedule every single year. I think it used to be 4 books when 5e was brand spanking new, and they've upped it to like 6 books now. They usually support the game each year with one giant campaign that's going to take you like 3 years to play through. Then they have a collection of adventures, like one-shots that you can drop into any campaign. Then they have something that's like player-facing, like Fizban's Guide to Dragons. Then they have like a campaign setting, and usually a couple of other things. That's kind of how the support has worked. It's 4 or 5 books every single year for the entirety of the product line, which will be coming to an end next year. Paizo, on the other hand, it's like they have so much Pathfinder content that they can't contain themselves. They're releasing stuff almost every single month. Instead of releasing these big grand campaigns, Paizo releases adventure paths. These can be 1, 3, or 6 little books that they release once a month in consecutive months, so that if you're playing every single week, you should be able to sort of keep up with the adventure path as it comes out. On top of that, they release books about magic, books about death, books about the impossible lands, books about campaign settings. You got books about guns, you have books about treasure. They are cranking out books for Pathfinder like it's going out of style. Some people view this as a negative because it leads to the game master sort of having to keep up with bloat almost. Because there's like, if they don't keep up with all the books, they're like, yeah, I want to play a gunslinger from this book. And if you don't have it, you're like, yeah, sure, play that. But you know what? All the rules are online for all these things, so you should be able to figure out. And the math, in the way that Pathfinder is balanced, you'll be fine. The reason that 5th edition had such a slow trickle of products coming out to support the game was because Wizards felt that with 4th edition, they inundated players with splat books and all of these different books. There was almost like a monthly release of books. This led to quality control issues, and this led to people being just like, there's too much of this and I'm not buying it. And that led to a low book sales, but that had more to do probably with the system not selling well. Paizo is amazing with their support. You have like 3 bestiaries at this point. They have an advanced player's guide. They have an advanced game master's guide. They go above and beyond. Someone like me coming from Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, seeing all of this support, it's like a kid in a candy store. I'm like, I don't know what to buy. There's so much of this stuff. I just want to get my hands on all of it. It all looks so cool. And it has amazing artwork. And the books, I've only been playing for a little while, but I've already purchased like 6 or 7 Pathfinder books because that's how awesome they look. I keep getting sucked in by them. So yeah, it's a noticeable difference just how much stuff Paizo produces for Pathfinder compared to Wizards of the Coast. It's a better supported system.
And that's it. Those are the 8 biggest differences that As Dungeon Masters, we have noticed going into Pathfinder for the first time. But we have one other phantom difference, and what is that?
Not really a difference at all. We have discovered that Pathfinder 2e and Dungeons & Dragons 5e are almost identical when it comes to difficulty of learning the systems. I am being brought back to my first days of 5e and fumbling over a lot of things and getting a lot of things wrong. If you can play 5e, you can play Pathfinder 2e. We are living proof of that.
If you can learn to play one, you can also learn to play the other.
They are
To
just
run.
Yes, they are just as dense as one another. The core cogs that make the engine run are similar enough to our brains.
Yeah.
It's just changing up a few different things here and there.
Yeah, we're not going from 5th edition to like Star Wars RPG.
Yeah.
Where they have their own
What are
set
these
of
dice?
dice. What are these symbols? I love the system myself, but hey, it took me a lot longer to learn that than to learn Pathfinder. D&D really gives you the basics and then suggests that you can add everything else to it to make it complex. And Pathfinder gives you everything. It front loads it, and if you don't want to use everything, you can remove it. So they essentially become the same game.
Yep.
Right?
You're not wrong.
But I do like that Pathfinder is front loading that
Expectation.
that those kinds of roles that the player wouldn't know the result of will only be seen by the GM, made by the GM, and if players really have a problem with that at the table, then fine, yeah, don't need to use it.
I really like the way that Pathfinder 2e handles healing. I like the way it handles resting, and I like the way it handles dying. One of my favorite things in any tabletop role-playing game is the downtime between adventures. What your characters are getting up to while they're just hanging around a town, rolling on like a carousing chart. I love that stuff. It brings my character to life. And I love it when Dungeon Masters and Game Masters include that. In 5th edition, I've played through like the entire Curse of Strahd campaign, and because you heal so fast in that, like, it took us like 2 years to run through that campaign. But in Ravenloft time, I think we completed the whole thing in like 35 days or something.
So you were stabbed a total of 119 times. You were eviscerated 22 times. You have restuffed your guts into your body 3 times.
I was a Warforged cleric, so it's
Okay.
No, not as much intestines leaving
All right.
my body.
Some more oil and tubing. Yeah. Okay. But so you've lost about 147 gallons of
Pennzoil.
Pennzoil. Yeah.
But again, I'm always thinking about the fiction of what's happening at the table, and the Pathfinder rules are like they're a little bit more realistic. I mean, not really, but like I buy into them.
I love saying believable.
Believable.
Right?
There you go.
Yeah.
Yes. The suspension of disbelief is easier to swallow.
Yes.
Right. So
Yeah.
I like that, and especially with the way dying works, because you're not getting that guy that's just dropping, popping up, and there's no consequences. In 5th edition, I always use the variant rule where if you drop multiple times in combat, or if you get taken out with like a critical hit, you're coming out of that thing with a permanent injury or something. I always use that rule because there's not enough consequences in 5e for my tables.
Me neither. I don't like the party dynamic when that is happening, and it doesn't stop if you don't do something about it. So I do also love that variant rule. If someone is throwing their body at the danger, and all the rest of the party can do is keep him alive, right? Heal him back up, and even the players that aren't healers are going over and trying to do medicine checks.
Shoving a potion in his face.
Yeah. And sometimes the easiest thing, instead of taking the player aside and telling them to stop playing the way they're playing, adding that rule is just a better solution for everyone.
So those are the differences that we've noticed. We like a lot of the differences. We don't necessarily think that like one system is like drastically better than the other. They're just different. But right now, being new, and this is the shiny ball that we're playing with, we're digging a lot of the stuff that we're noticing.
I'm Kamo.
I'm Wolf.
We're 2 Dungeon Masters learning to play Pathfinder. Join us on our journey. We're Basic Glitches. Please subscribe. Toll the Dead for notifications.
We want to help out brand new Pathfinder players as much as possible. Go ahead and check out this video right here where we talk about online resources to help new players getting into Pathfinder 2e.
Later, Liches.
Bye!